Hi, I'm Kim Billings, Anoka County Master Gardener in my 16th year of volunteer service, and I'd like to thank you for joining me in this In the Garden program on how to start seeds in plastic jugs. Many of us start getting seed catalogs or start seeing seed packets for sale early in January. It gets us dreaming and planning and maybe even longing for spring. There are many reasons why we might want to start seeds like this. One is it gives us a jump on our short Minnesota growing season, and that can result in healthier plants for our yard and garden. It allows us to save seeds from plants that we liked the years before and grow the same color or variety that we did enjoy. We can try out other kinds of plants at a lower cost with seeds over purchasing nursery-grown plants. It's helped me to increase my volume of perennials, natives, and pollinator plants in my own yard. My annual beds are fuller when I start my own seeds, and I have money to spend on nursery-grown plants that have more specialized starting requirements. It's an intriguing project that takes the long days of Minnesota winters, makes them go by more quickly, and can satisfy our itch to be out in the garden. It gives us a way to start seeds for our spring plant sales or to share with our neighbors and friends. It's a good project that spans the generations. It's great for kids or elders, and it encourages our spirit of environmental stewardship. People generally take pride in their gardens, and this project allows us the grace of helping others to grow things and share in that sense of accomplishment. We can improve our health and wellness through better eating habits by growing our own food, and starting seeds with the plastic jug method helps to expand our vegetable growing season as well. I've tried my hand at starting seeds indoors over the winter months. I have limited space, and without the lights and the warming units, I've had limited success at winter indoor seed starting. I was introduced to this seed starting method in the plastic jugs several years ago and was intrigued and excited for really several reasons. The first was that there's no special equipment that's required. We're going to reuse and recycle plastic jugs. The rest of the supplies are either at a low or moderate cost, or you may even have them on hand right now. I'm going to give you some simple and easy instructions to follow. And the biggest one for me is that there is no space restrictions, because you plant your seeds and you set the jugs outside. That caught my attention right away. Starting seeds outside in our Minnesota winters, how does that work? Before I get into the process of this, I'd like to talk a little bit about germination with you. Germination is the process by which a plant grows from a seed. The most common example of germination is the sprouting of a seedling from a seed. Seeds are living things, and they're a complete package. Germination is the first push to move from a seed to a plant with the energy that's stored in the seed. The seeds need the right conditions to germinate. The most important external factors include the right temperature, water, oxygen or air, and sometimes light or darkness to trigger that germination process. As we create our little mini greenhouses with our plastic jugs, we're meeting those needs and we are starting that germination process. The amount of energy that a seed stores for its first push is limited. It's just enough to start the root hairs and a shoot that pushes up through the soil. Once through the soil, it puts out those first two leaves. Those are called cotyledons. When these first leaves are up and out, the process of photosynthesis takes over, and that's what supplies the growing plant with the energy it needs to go into a full-size plant. Seed planting depth is always outlined on the back of a seed packet. It's usually 1/8 to 1/4 inch deep. The reason for that is that, again, because of that limited energy supply, if we bury the seed too deeply, the seed expends all of its energy, and if it doesn't get those little stem and cotyledons up above the soil, it can't start photosynthesis, and it can't get the energy that it needs to grow to a full-size plant. So that seed depth is very important. We need to make sure that it's not too deep so that that seed doesn't use up all of its energy before it can get to that photosynthesis part. Cotyledons, remember those the first leaves that come up, the cotyledons of many plants look very similar to one another. And they're very difficult to tell apart, those first little plants, until they put on their third or their fourth leaves. You may have had the experience that I have had of planting flowers or vegetables in your garden without maybe being too careful about the labeling. And when they come up, you're not quite sure what you've got growing there until they get a little bit bigger. That's what happened with us, especially when I was doing this project with kids. You couldn't tell the carrots from the radishes from the flowers. That's why it's going to be really important, I'm going to talk about it more later, to make sure that we carefully label our plantings. So let's get back to that starting seeds outside in our Minnesota winter, and how does that work? Here are the ingredients that we're going to need for this project. The first are seeds. The seeds are available in package forms like this through catalogs or at your grocery stores or your home improvement stores. Or we can save seeds, and that's what I'm going to be using today for this demonstration. Is I've saved some marigold seeds from marigolds that I grew in my yard. Annuals are plants that have one growing season, and annuals can be started in this plastic jug fashion outside in Minnesota in late March. Some examples of annual seeds, flower seeds that we can grow in this method are marigolds, zinnias, salvia. We can also start our vegetable garden plants like tomatoes or peppers. We can get a jump on some of those pollinator-friendly plants like sunflowers and snapdragons. And of course, there's a whole variety of herbs that we can start in this plastic jug fashion, like basil and sage, lemon balm, oregano, and a variety of thyme. Perennials are plants with a multiple growing season, and perennials can be started in this plastic jug version in late February. So we can do perennials actually earlier than annuals. Some examples of perennials that we can start in this jug method are echinacea, common name is coneflower, Shasta daisies, rudbeckia, again the common name for that would be black-eyed Susans. Some of our pollinator-friendly plants would include Joe Pye weed or other native milkweed, and all of those have been successfully started late in February in the recycled jug method. I've already mentioned about saved seeds. That's another way that we can have seeds for this process. And I have successfully saved and restarted and grown for a couple of seasons in a row marigolds, salvias, sunflowers, just to name a few of the seeds that I have saved and restarted with this method. Some plants work better in this method than others. For example, impatiens, those beautiful flowers with the bright colored petals that grow very well in the shade, they require more nursery care for their starting and are not conducive to this kind of application. I would recommend that you check out the University of Minnesota Master Gardener website for the kinds of plants that would work best for your location. And then I'm going to encourage you just to let your imagination guide you. One of the next pieces that we need for this project are labels. And again, here's a place where we can reduce, reuse, and recycle. These are labels from nursery-grown plants that I purchased in the past. And on the back, there's plenty enough space for you to write on there, and these will be put in the jug. Remember, I told you it's very important that we make sure that we know what we've got started in our jugs. But this is one way just to reuse old tags. A lot of people just toss them away. Well, we've found a new purpose for them. We can repurpose them. Another reduce, reuse, recycle tip is something that we've used with our Master Garden plant sale. This is a piece of a Venetian blind. The blinds, the little skinny slats, if you take them apart and cut them into little pieces, these too can be used as tags in your plantings. Of course, you can purchase them, and tags like this come in a tan color, green color, lots of variety of colors, and they can be bought in multi-packs. Another way to reuse tags that have come from nursery plantings are, I spoke earlier about black-eyed Susans and coneflowers. These were tags that actually came from nursery plants that I purchased, and these could be used again if I'm starting Echinacea or Rudbeckia seeds. I can just slip this tag right down into the jug and know what those seedlings are when they start coming up. When it comes to making labels, a couple of tips that I have found to be very useful. And the first is write all of your tags all at once. So we're going to, let's say we're going to grow sunflowers, and we read the package and it says the variety is Velvet Queen. So what I would do is I would take this, the secret ingredient to these tags that make them indelible and last is a number 2 pencil. Real simple, something you probably have at your house right now. What I would jot on this tag would be Sunflower Velvet Queen. After I plant the seeds and the tag goes into the jug, the other key with this is to put the tag down under the soil level, because keeping it below the soil level is what helps to keep that pencil, that simple number 2 pencil, indelible. What I'm going to recommend that you do is hang on to the packet. This was a spent packet from last year, and I clip all of them together. When it comes time to transplant, I'll take this, I'll open it up, I'll pull the tag out, and it will tell me that this is Sunflower Velvet Queen, and then I can go back to the packet and refer to the more specific directions on here for planting depth of seedlings and spacing. So make sure on your tag you write enough information so when you go back to the seed packets, you know what you've got planted in there. Okay, now it's time to talk about the soil. And any garden variety soil will work for this process. I have a suggestion for you is that at the end of the growing season, retailers are trying to move out their summer stock so that they have room for their fall and winter stock, and that might be a time that you can pick up your potting soil at a reduced price, squirrel it away until you get to your winter planting project, and you're good to go with your soil. Again, any garden variety soil will work for this process. A technique that I like to do whenever I'm working with seeds is to pre-moisten the soil. I spoke to you earlier about planting depth and how important that is for the germination of plants. And what I have found is whether I'm working with seeds in the jug or just seeds in the garden, seeds in regular pots, is that if you work with dampened, moist soil to begin with, you're going to give the seeds the proper hydration that they need to get started for their germination, but you won't overwater. Because overwatering depletes the oxygen that the seed needs for germination. The other risk that you have is if you planted up your jug and then poured water in, you have a chance now, a risk now, of causing rivers and gullies in your mini greenhouse, and that alters the planting depth as well. So I've got some soil in the basin here. I'm going to stir it around here a little bit, and I'm just going to grab a handful, and you see how it kind of clumps together? It kind of falls apart. This is an indication that it's pretty close to having the right moisture. So all I'm going to do is just add a little water, and I'm going to stir it up again so that I can incorporate that moisture into the soil. And then I'm going to do the little test that I just showed you. I'm going to grab a handful of it. And when it holds in a fairly good clump like this, that shows that it's got the right moisture. You're noticing that there's no water running down the side of my hand, so that it's not overwatered. And actually, I really like to get in and work it with your hands. When you do this seed starting, you'll be doing this in late February for your perennials and late March for your annuals. I usually do it in my garage, so if there's dirt, soil being scattered and spilled around, it's an easier cleanup. It's a little bit chilly sometimes in March, so you need to get to the business of getting it done. All right, I've got this incorporated. I like the feel of it better with my hand. And when I grab in there again, you can see that it looks a little bit shiny. You can see the moisture in the soil. You can see that when I squeeze it, it holds a nice clump. That's the kind of moisture level that we're looking for when we're pre-moistening our soil. Okay. And now to the fun part, the crown jewel, the mini greenhouse itself, our plastic jugs. Any kind of jug will work. It can be a water or a milk jug, a juice jug. I like the tall vinegar jugs. Whether it's a frosted or a clear, it doesn't really matter. They all will work for this. I prefer the vinegar jugs. I think it's a sturdier plastic, and I have actually been able to reuse the jugs that I have cut and used from season to season. The water jugs and milk jugs are a softer plastic, and my experience with those was after one season of starting the seeds in them, they needed to go into the recycle bin, which is still, you've still gotten one more reuse out of it. The recommendation that I have for you with these jugs is that you make sure that you clean the interior of them very well. Make sure that they're rinsed out. If they've had juice or milk or vinegar in them, you need to make sure that that's rinsed out well so that you don't have any residue of that when you start putting your soil and your seeds and your plantings in here. As far as the outside goes, I don't bother with cleaning the outside. One season sitting outside with the rain and the snow and the wind and the temperature changing, by springtime this paper peels right off. And remember, we've already talked about putting well-written labels in under the soil level. You can, if you'd like, put Sharpie marker on the outside, but what I have found is that the weather conditions wear that away. And that's not a reliable way to be labeling your seed project. Okay, I'm going to show you with the marker where we're going to cut this to get this prepared to make this our little mini greenhouse. The marker step is not necessary unless you're marking the jugs and somebody else is doing the cutting. The marking of the jugs is for demonstration purposes. We're going to put some drainage holes into the bottom, and I just make 3 slashes with my knife, creating a triangle. I put 3 triangles in the bottom. So when we come to cutting, this is what the pattern will look like. If they're not quite triangles, that's okay. The shape of that doesn't matter. But you want to make sure that you have adequate drainage in the bottom of your jug. It's critical that you have a place for any excess moisture to run away. And now we need to get access to the jug to be able to plant our seedlings. So where we're going to start is just to one side of the handle and right under this lip. That's another reason why I love these tall, sturdier jugs, is because it's very clear where the cutting should happen. All right, I'm going to cut this. The knife that I have chosen is a utility knife with a sharp blade. It's a retractable sharp blade. Any knife would do. A little bit about knife safety is that a sharp knife is a must, and a dull knife is dangerous. So please remember to make sure that you have a sharp knife. You want to be cutting away from yourself, and you want to be using an even pressure, not necessarily gentle, but an even pressure. I recommend that you read the instructions and know how your knife works before you use it. So I'm going to show you right where I've marked on the jug. Just going to put the knife in with even pressure, nice sharp blade. I'm going to press down. I'm going to score down. I'm going to meet those two and create a triangle, and then you can see how that hole was made. I'm going to continue that over here. Again, cutting down and away from myself. Even pressure. I'm going to meet. And whether they stay connected a little bit, it's fine. What's most important is that there's space for that water to flow out. You need to have drainage. And if you are doing this as a project with friends, sometimes you get chatting and they don't turn out to be exactly triangles, and that works too. So I have 3 drainage holes in the bottom. And now I'm going to start where I started making my mark. And this part actually is very easy to do. The knife just kind of glides right through. All right, I'm going to retract my blade, and now we have access. The cap needs to be thrown away. That's a very important part. People think, oh, I'm going to keep the cap with it, and you need to make sure that you throw that cap away. If you can visualize what's going to be happening here in a few minutes is we're going to get the soil and the seeds in here. We're going to connect this, we're going to tape this shut, and it's going to go outside. It needs to have a space for the moisture, be it snow or rain, to come in, and then the drainage holes for the extra to go out. So get rid of the caps. Okay, so now we have our jug ready to go. I prefer the tall vinegar jugs, and not everybody has access to that. The plastic water or milk jugs are readily available. The procedure, the process is similar for that. We're going to throw the cap away. I always recommend that we start making the drainage holes in the bottom first, because having the jug in its entirety, that structure makes it easier to hang on to, and makes using your knife safely easier. So without making any marker marks on it, we're just going to go and we're going to cut out some drainage holes. Like that. You can do 3, you can do 4. This one's not, like I told you before, this plastic is a little bit softer, so my triangle didn't turn out quite like a triangle, but it's a drainage hole, and that's what it is. You want to make sure that you have at least that much drainage. If you put a few more in there because you got carried away with your knife, that works too. I would do the same process as far as hanging on to the handle and then working around. Again, I'm cutting away from myself, around the jug. And you can see how this kind of bends and wiggles and is a little bit. Come around to about where that handle starts, and then when you press that back, that's where you would have access. And you can see where I'm going to get quite a bit more growth potential in this size than I would in this size. But this jug will work just as well for starting your seedlings. Okay, if you got juice jugs, that'll work too. Again, we're getting rid of the cap. We're going to go in the bottom, and we're going to cut some drainage holes. And this is a little tougher. Now you see why I prefer the vinegar jugs. All right. This is turning out to be more circular rather than triangular, but I'm getting some drainage holes in there. There we go. Okay, I got some drainage holes in there. They're not pretty, but they're in there and it'll work. This one's handle is not proud like this. It's kind of indented in there, but it does have the rim around the top here, and that's what I would use. Starting from about where my thumb is, I'm going to make the line about to where my fingers are holding it. And this part goes through much smoother. And if you try to open it and you don't quite get it open, well, that's all right. You just lay it back down and you cut a little bit more until you can open it like that. And so this jug, you would do the same thing as far as putting your soil and your seeds in here, and it would be taped shut. It doesn't have a cover on it, and it would work just as well for seed starting. So any plastic jug, whether it is frosted or clear, tall or short, can work for this application. I'll put my knife away. All right. Now, one of the secret ingredients here, and I'm going to encourage you not to skimp on the tape, and it's the Scotch Tough Duct Tape Transparent. This is the magic key. This is the product that we're going to use to tape the jug shut. When we tape it shut, that's what's going to help hold the right amount of heat in. It's going to help us create our little mini greenhouses. Clear plastic, or the clear packaging tape, doesn't always hold up. And if it doesn't hold up and your jug doesn't stay shut, you're allowing too much heat to go out, too much moisture to come in on those little tiny seeds or seedlings. The real sticky duct tape is real sticky, and it holds really well. And come time in the spring to pull that tape off, it makes it really difficult, and you run the risk of tipping your jug or upending your seeds or seedlings. And when we mess with that seed depth, we are setting our little greenhouses up for failure. So it was recommended to me when I first learned about this not to skip on the tape, to use this one. It costs $5 or $6 at your home improvement store. Just get it. Well, I had to try it my own way. So I did try the clear packaging tape, and she was right. It didn't hold, and it left big gaps, and those jugs were not a success. And I tried the sticky duct tape because I had some of that, and she was right. It was real sticky, and came springtime, when you went to pull it off, you were tossing your jugs all over. So if you're like me, you may need to experiment just to prove it to yourself. We'll go for it. And then come back and we will know that the original suggestion is right on. This project, and we're worth the investment of the Scotch Tough Clear Duct Tape. Okay, so what we're going to need to do to put this all together was our seeds. We're going to be using these saved marigold seeds that I have from last year. Our label, which I have written on with my number 2 pencil. Our soil, which we have pre-moistened. Remember, we got that to the clumping stage where the water wasn't running out, but the dirt was holding into a nice clump. So now let's put this all together. We have our jug. We're going to bring our pre-moistened soil over, just kind of smoothing out some of those clumps in there. I'm going to add a couple of inches of soil to our plastic jug. And I'm just going to smooth it out here. And I'm just kind of breaking up the little clumps that are in here so it's nice and smooth and even in here. And as you can see, I got a couple of inches of soil in there. Now I'm going to take a generous sprinkling of, these are the marigold seeds that I collected from plants that I grew last year. When I collect seeds like this, I like to keep them in paper containers. When you buy seeds, they come in paper containers. That helps to keep them dry until you can get them into the right environment where they can germinate. So I'm going to do a generous sprinkling over the top of the soil so there's an even layer of seeds on the soil. And I'm going to take, and I like to do this part with my hand. I like to put the final soil on top, taking a clump, and then I'm just gently, this is what I'm doing inside of the jug. I'm doing this inside of the jug so that I get a nice even sprinkling over the top of those seeds, because that seed depth is really critical. We want to make sure that we're not burying them too deeply. Okay, and so we've got those together. I have my tag that I have labeled with my number 2 pencil. I'm going to slide that down below the soil surface, and that really, I didn't believe it when that master gardener told me, you just write on these little plastic tags with a number 2 pencil and you make sure it gets down in the soil, and 3-4 years later you can pull it out and it's still, and she actually took me over to some plants in her garden and she pulled up a tag, and she was right. It looked like the day she had written it. So this tag trick will work in the jugs. It'll also work in your gardens at home. So you can reuse these tags, write whatever plant is on it, and make sure it's submerged below the soil. Try it. It's kind of a fun project just to try. Okay, back to our little mini greenhouse. We've got the soil in there, we've got the seeds at the right depth, we've put our tag down in the bottom, and now it's time to seal it up. We're not going to skimp, we're using the good tape. And with experience, you'll know about how long a piece you need to pull off. It tears very easily. And I'm going to turn the jug, and I'm going to start at the place where I started cutting the jug. And I'm placing the tape, and if you don't quite get it down straight the first time, it's okay. And if it decides it's not going to cooperate, you just rip it off and start over. I'm getting the seam in the middle of the tape. And I'm just pushing the edges down. And there isn't any reason why you can't take 2 or 3 pieces of tape if you don't pull the right length to start with. It's all good, it all works. So I'm going to overlap a little bit. I overlapped here where I ended with the first piece, and I'm going to wrap it around like that. And now that seam is all covered. And that tape will stay on there for you till next spring. All right. So now you need to know a little bit about the care of these jugs. A tip that I would offer you, I would suggest and offer, is that you make all of your tags at once, you cut all of your jugs at once, and then you do all of the planting at once. And then you can take your messy gloves off and do all of the taping at once. So if you do it in batches like that, it's a really fun project. And I do it with a friend of mine every spring, have been doing it for several years. Once you get your jugs ready like this, you've got your little mini greenhouses ready to go. What you're going to do with it now is the part that's very cool. And you're going to set them outside. You're going to be doing your perennials at the end of February, your annuals at the end of March, beginning of April, and then you're going to take your jugs and you're going to set them outside. Placement outside is very important. We need to make sure that they're outside where they can get the sunlight and they can get the moisture. Be careful of where you're placing them, that you're not placing them too close to a building where they're protected by the overhang. You want them out beyond the overhang so the snow or the water can get into the top of the jug. Don't worry about overwatering, because whatever the excess will go out those drainage holes in the bottom. Pay attention to which side of the building that you're putting it on. Put it on the side of a building that's going to get sunlight when the sun is shining in our beautiful Minnesota winters. And then the other key thing is you need to make sure you place your jugs somewhere where they will not be disturbed. Disturbing the jugs will disturb that seed depth again. So whether man or beast, make sure that you're putting them somewhere where they're not in a traffic area, where you're not going to bump them, where any animals, pets or non-pets can be tipping them over. Pretty much then you let Mother Nature take her course. You are going to want to pay attention in the springtime for moisture. And the way that you do that is you pull your jug over and you peek down inside of there, and you know what this moisture-filled soil looks like because you've gotten it all ready, you've put it in your jug. You're going to notice and you're going to recognize what it looks like when it's dry. And you're going to need to water your jugs if we happen to have a spring that doesn't have a lot of moisture. And the way to do that is pretty simple. If it is warm enough for you to have your hose out, the gentle spray on the hose on the top here will get some water gently spraying down in there as if it were raining. If it's too cold for the hoses, the way that you're going to do it is you're going to use a watering can. And I want you to be very careful, gently tip the jug, not too much or you're going to disturb those seeds again. And then you run a little bead of water down the side of the jug. And what's going to happen is it's going to gently run in, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but it gently ran in along the side of the jug. It's going to go down and it's going to moisten all of the soil that's in the bottom. If you do the direct pour in the middle, you're going to run the risk then now of that gully and splashing the seeds and the seedlings and messing up that seed depth. So if you need to, make sure you're checking for moisture in the spring, and if you need to, gently put water along the edges of the jug to keep that moisture. Now, the question is, when do I release my plants? When do I untape them? I have a jug here that I started a few weeks ago, It's got little baby marigold seedlings in there, and if you peek in there, you can see those little seedlings in there. Some of them just have their little cotyledons, those first two little leaves. Some of them you're starting to see the third and fourth leaf on. When your seedlings are at this stage, I would not open it. It still needs the mini greenhouse environment. It still needs the warmth and the moisture and the protection that the jug has. For demonstration, I'm going to pull the tape off so you can take a peek in here and see what they look like. Now this is why we use this tape in the spring, because you see how easy that pulls off? No sweat. And if you peek down in here, you can see these little seedlings. Some of them just have the little cotyledons, the little two first leaves. Some of them have 3 or 4 leaves. This is still too early to take the tape off. When you peek down into your jug and you're seeing more greenery, and I've got a surprise in here for you. These ones actually have flowers. In the springtime, they won't have flowers yet. These are some examples taken from a fall garden, but again, see how easily that tape came off. When your plants get to be more like this, where there's more greenery, when it's more easily identifiable what kind of plant you have in there, the tag is still down along the side that you can reach down and pull out to verify in case they don't have flowers. This is the point where you are going to want to take the tape off of your jug. You're going to want to let the top open on your jugs at this point. At this point, the plants are big enough that they require a little bit more moisture, and the spring rains and or snows will help to give them the adequate moisture. Again, there's drainage holes in the bottom, so don't worry about overwatering because the excess will run out. Occasionally in Minnesota winters and springs, we have times where we have hard killing frosts, and in that event, you're going to want to go out and just push the top shut. You don't need to retape, just push the top shut, and that'll give enough protection from any hard frost. When those hard frost nights are over, just go back and pull them open. They get plenty of sunshine, they get plenty of moisture. And then a really important thing that happens too is that as the plant grows up and the breeze goes through those stems, that breeze going through the stem actually strengthens the stem. And as it strengthens the stem, it makes the plant hardier. And so you're going to have a better product when you go to transplant it out of your jug. So it's really good to let the top go down in the spring on these plants. And I'm going to show you one more example here of why I like the tall jugs, is that it allows some protection and some structure so that the plants can even grow taller. When your plants get to be this tall and this full and the top is off, you've got a really nice, sturdy, healthy, hardy plant that's a good transplant then into your yard or garden, into your flower boxes, or into your planting in your containers. And I brought up transplanting. When do we do that? It's recommended that we transplant at the end of May. And what's really important about that is the temperature of the soil. It's less about the temperature of the air at the end of May, but it's the temperature of the soil that's really important. When you're taking these little roots and you're moving them into your garden spot or into your planter boxes, you want to make sure that the soil that they're in is got that minimum required temperature so that they can grow and be a beautiful plant and a beautiful addition to your yard and garden. So to recap, this is a fun and simple project for all to participate in. It's great to include the youth in the areas where they have the skill set for, and it's equally great to include elders for whatever skill set they could participate in. Perennials can be started in late February, and our annuals can be started in late March, early April. Remember, don't skimp on the tape. You're worth it. Invest in the good stuff. Place your jugs when they're put together and taped up out where they will get the rain or the snow, the adequate precipitation and sunlight. Make sure you put them somewhere where they will not be disturbed. I'm going to encourage you to try new things. I'd like for you to have fun, get planting, and I'd like to thank you for joining me today.